Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are really peeling back the curtain on the operational reality of creative work.
hmm
We're going to try and look past that romantic myth of the starving artist, the idea that artistic freedom is somehow found through
Yeah, the
instability.
struggle.
Exactly. And we're going to look at what it actually takes to succeed. I mean, really succeed over decades when you have basically zero financial or institutional cushioning.
Yeah, and we've got a fascinating stack of sources for this. We have a conceptual framing document that really defines the territory for us.
Okay.
Then we have the detailed CV of a working visual artist, Roos van der Jaagt.
Mm.
She works professionally as Double O Roos.
And that CV is something else.
It is. And finally, a press kit for a documentary podcast that's centered around her life and work called The Artist.
So our mission today is to really get into the logistics of sustained excellence. We're asking, what happens to the work and to the person doing the work when precarity isn't a phase, but just a permanent condition.
And that's the key word, isn't it? The material here forces us to shift our language. It makes us see this condition not as, say, a choice or a temporary period of risk-taking, but as a permanent state of exposure.
Exposure. Say more about that.
It's this constant, enduring tension of working without a real safety net. And that exposure, that's what ends up dictating every single strategic and creative decision.
Okay, so let's unpack that. This core idea, exposure versus freedom. When you look at the source materials definition, it's remarkably precise. It says precarity means working without a safety net, financial, institutional, even emotional,
Yes.
while the expectation to deliver original, high-quality work, it never lets up.
And that expectation is absolutely key. What's so interesting here is how the conceptual document actively resists framing instability as some kind of liberty.
Right, it's not a feature, it's a bug.
Exactly. They argue that this lack of any real margin for error, the exposure, it actually restricts creative choices. It's a profound barrier to building the kind of consistent, long-term structures that you need to make sustained high performance even possible.
So we're not talking about a temporary hustle. This isn't about, your 20s. We're talking about a structural environment that demands you operate at full throttle year after year with no guaranteed income or support.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to show that kind of continuity under just immense strain, we have the CV of Roos van der Jaagt. I mean, this artist's entire trajectory, it immediately challenges that cliche that precarity just leads to short-lived careers or burnout.
It's a really staggering history. You see a professional practice that starts formally with a solo painting exhibition back in 1996.
1996.
And it continues right up through planned work for 2026, things like the Future Image Lab at major international art events. So we're looking at a 30-year professional life. That continuity is, it's proof that the individual is adapting and persisting.
It really connects the dots for us. The very fact that a successful, high-output artist, and she's working across visual arts, photography, motion film,
all at once.
has maintained this for decades. It shows that this condition of precarity is not a personal failing. It's not a lack of talent. It is purely and simply the environment.
So the system itself demands this.
It demands this level of persistence, of constant negotiation, which is why the press kit for the artist frames her career path as a process of continuous recalibration, not stability.
That makes the work sound utterly exhausting because it means the pressure isn't focused on one big crisis moment, like, say, losing a grant. It's this constant low-level hum of stress in the background.
Yes, that's what the source material calls the constant calculations running in the background.
Constant calculations.
Yeah, the logistics are a continuous strain. And these calculations, they're not just, budgeting for art supplies. They're strategic decisions about your professional viability. Like, how long can I actually afford to work on this one conceptual piece? When do I have to pause my creative vision to just aggressively chase the next funding cycle or the next commission? It becomes this logistical challenge that just overshadows the creative process itself.
I think many of us as listeners, we might assume that once an artist achieves a certain level of success, they've got international exhibitions, awards, that pressure eases up. But her CV suggests the complete opposite. It's like success just means the calculations become more and more complex.
Precisely. We see clear evidence of this constant calculation in her strategic adaptation. Just look at the disciplines listed. To maximize her opportunities and just remain functional, there's this aggressive diversification. She works in visual art, photography, and film.
She's not putting all her eggs in one basket.
She's managing 3 high-level production schedules at the same time.
What really stands out to me, though, is the commitment to continuous education. Even with decades of established success, this isn't just about creative curiosity, is it?
No, not at all. It's a direct response to structural pressure, the pressure to remain competitive, to stay technologically relevant. We see her taking on a micromaster in integrated digital media from NYU between 2020 and 2021.
Right.
And then she enrolls in master's modules focused on innovation management and business innovation that run from 2022 through 2024.
Okay, hold on. Let me just sit with that. This is a highly accomplished, globally established artist, but she is still having to invest her time, her energy, and her money into intense, formalized business and tech education in what is, her mid-career.
Yes.
That just suggests the safety net is so thin that she fears becoming obsolete if she isn't constantly upskilling.
That is the exposure made visible. The learning never stops, not just creatively, but professionally and strategically. Because if she stops adapting, the lack of institutional support will just let her practice stall out.
And you can see the results.
You can see the direct result of this adaptation. There's a 2024 commission listed for an AI photography project. She has successfully moved into a cutting-edge new media field to secure work.
It's just a relentless demand. And alongside the diversification of her skills, you also see a diversification of her business structure.
Yes.
The CV lists her personal autonomous practice, Double O Roos, running at the same time as the establishment of Stichting Earth Rising, which is basically a nonprofit production platform starting in 2020.
And that strategic organization, it speaks volumes about the business requirements of art today. The Stichting, or foundation, is specifically noted for handling projects that transcend the individual professional practice. Meaning she has had to build her own strategic support structure just to manage the demands of the large-scale, funded collaborative work that's too big for any single individual to handle.
So the implication for you, the listener, is pretty clear. The success you see in the final art object is the result of logistics, of self-management, and high-level business strategy, just as much as it is a creative vision.
It is. The artist is essentially operating a perpetually self-funded, highly competitive, global startup.
And that takes us right into this idea of invisible labor.
Exactly. If the artist is constantly calculating logistics and engineering structures just for survival, then much of the true work required to sustain this output is completely unseen. Unseen by the public, unseen by the funding bodies, and crucially, a lot of it is behavioral.
Yeah, the sources get into this. They detail the specific pressures really beautifully. It's the unspoken pressure to appear functional.
To appear functional.
You have to be productive, of course, but you cannot, under any circumstances, appear desperate or unstable or uncertain. The underlying instability has to be hidden.
And this is performance's expectation. This is the social dimension of precarity. Hiding that instability quietly is critical because the perception of instability, even if it's just the reality of the market, that can interfere with your professional standing, with future opportunities.
So you always have to project confidence.
You're constantly required to perform confidence, flexibility, availability, and, I think most tellingly, gratitude, even when the compensation or the conditions are poor.
So the artist isn't just managing their finances, they're managing their emotional and psychological state just to maintain a stable professional facade. That must take up an enormous amount of mental bandwidth.
It does. And a huge part of this hidden work is administrative. It's intellectual. The press kit for the artist documentary specifically talks about how artists are required to translate artistic vision into institutional language.
What does that mean exactly?
It's for subsidy applications, for funding bodies, for policy navigation.
That sounds like a language barrier, not a creative one. Like you're creating the work in one language, but you have to write the grant application in a completely different, highly specialized language.
It is exactly that. And that translation load is a key part of the invisible labor. It's all the effort you spend mediating your own creative work for the systems that might or might not support it. That administrative work is necessary to maintain the appearance of stability, of financial viability to all these external stakeholders.
It's what keeps the projects looking professional and, well, deserving of funding. And we really have to emphasize, as the source documents mandate, that this condition is structural. This isn't a personal problem where an artist just needs to be, more organized or a better business person. We are talking about systemic pressure.
We are. The sources are so explicit on this point.
Yeah.
This is about the structural, financial, and psychological conditions that shape artistic work today. If we individualize this condition, we've missed the entire point.
And the Artist Podcast seems dedicated to documenting exactly that, how precarity is normalized within cultural infrastructures.
Yes, it covers major structural issues, things like subsidy dependency, or how rejection becomes a structural condition that's just built into the funding cycle, rather than being a temporary setback.
And the fundamental, often insufficient economics of artistic labor.
Yes. And if we look back at Roos van der Jag's career one last time, we see someone who is, by all measures, successfully navigating this incredibly harsh landscape.
Her success is undeniable.
It is. Expensive international film festival presence. We're talking IFFR, Cannes Short Film Corner, the Hollywood Real Independent Film Festival, not to mention major selections like being a Louvre finalist.
And having a piece orbit the Earth as part of a NASA project. I mean,
These are enormous achievements.
but the sources remind us that these high-profile successes, they aren't the end of the instability. They're just the evidence of an ongoing, continuous negotiation with that instability.
They prove the persistence, they prove the skill, but they do not prove the existence of a safety net.
So we set out today to treat precarity as a condition that fundamentally reshapes performance, focusing on that idea of exposure and constant calibration.
And I think we found that operational reality, clearly defined across all the source material, it's a life lived in constant self-management.
So we have to name the ultimate cost, as the conceptual framework mandates.
We do. This level of exposure, it profoundly affects risk-taking. It dictates the pacing and the scope of the work. And perhaps most importantly, it consumes massive amounts of mental bandwidth.
How so?
Well, all those choices that are driven by logistics, when to apply for a grant, what to prioritize, how to present your professional status, they are deeply present in the process of making the art. But as the source says, they are rarely visible in the final result.
Which means the person making the work is silently normalizing a staggering level of stress, a level of emotional regulation, just to produce something that appears, to the rest of us, effortless and autonomous.
Which leaves us with a truly provocative question for you to consider. If sustained, high-level production requires constant strategic recalibration, continuous upskilling, and a hidden functional behavioral performance simply to secure funding and professional standing, then what is the true definition of artistic autonomy in a world where visibility and viability rely so heavily on institutional language and managed professional appearances?
Something to chew on long after this deep dive is complete.